The restaurant was the kind of place where everything cost too much and looked too perfect. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over white tablecloths that didn't have a single wrinkle. The silverware gleamed like it had never been used, even though people ate there every night. It was Tuesday evening, and Richard Bennett sat across from his 8-year-old daughter Lily, watching her color on the kids' menu while they waited for their food. Richard owned 7 restaurants just like this one across the state. He'd built his empire from nothing, starting with a small diner 20 years ago and working his way up until he could afford places with valet parking and wine lists thicker than phone books. Tonight was their weekly dinner together, something he never missed no matter how busy work got. It was his way of staying connected to Lily after the divorce. "Daddy, look what I drew." Lily held up her menu, showing him a picture of what might have been a cat or possibly a dog. Richard smiled and nodded, glancing at his watch. Their usual waitress was running behind tonight. Outside the tall windows that lined the restaurant's front, snow had started to fall. Not the pretty kind that looked nice on Christmas cards, but the wet, heavy kind that soaked through clothes and made everything miserable. Richard noticed it and made a mental note to have the valets stay on top of clearing the entrance. The last thing he needed was a lawsuit from some customer slipping on ice. That's when Lily stopped coloring. She was staring out the window, her crayon frozen in midair. Richard followed her gaze and saw what had caught her attention. An older woman sat hunched against the brick wall between his restaurant and the building next door. She wore a thin jacket that had probably been donated from some church closet, and her hands were wrapped in what looked like old socks with the toes cut out. A cardboard sign rested against her knees, but the falling snow was already making the words blur and run. "Daddy," Lily said quietly, "that lady is cold." Richard shifted in his seat. He'd seen the woman there before. She'd been showing up outside his restaurant for the past few weeks, and he'd already called the police twice to have her moved along. Both times, she'd just come back the next day. The cops said unless she was causing trouble or trespassing on his property, there wasn't much they could do. "She'll be fine, sweetheart," Richard said, trying to redirect Lily's attention. "Look, here comes our food." The waitress, a young woman named Jennifer who'd been working at the restaurant for about 2 years, approached with their order. She set down Lily's chicken tenders and Richard's steak, but Lily didn't even look at her plate. Her eyes stayed locked on the window. Richard cut into his steak. It was cooked perfectly, just the way he liked it. The first bite melted in his mouth, worth every penny of the $45 it cost. But when he looked up, Lily hadn't touched her food. She was still watching the woman outside, who had pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself as the wind picked up. "Lily, eat your dinner," Richard said, a little more firmly this time. "I'm not hungry," she whispered. "You said you were starving in the car." "I know, but—" Lily's voice trailed off. She was only 8, but she had her mother's stubborn streak. Once she got something in her head, she didn't let it go easily. Richard sighed and put down his fork. "Sweetheart, I know what you're thinking, but we can't help every person we see who needs something. There are shelters for people like that, places they can go to get warm and get food. Then why isn't she at one?" It was a fair question, and Richard didn't have a good answer. He'd never really thought about it before. Maybe she doesn't want to follow their rules. Some of these people, they prefer to be on the streets. Lily frowned, and Richard could tell she didn't believe him. She was a smart kid, too smart sometimes. She looked at her plate of food, then back at the window. The woman outside had her head down now, trying to protect her face from the snow that was falling harder. "What if we gave her my dinner?" Lily asked. "I already ate a snack after school." "I'm not really that hungry." Richard felt a mix of pride and frustration. Pride because his daughter had such a good heart. Frustration because she didn't understand how the world worked yet. "It's not that simple, honey. If we give food to one person, then tomorrow there will be 5 people out there. Then 10. Before you know it, this restaurant gets a reputation, and paying customers stop coming because they don't want to walk past homeless people to get inside." "But Daddy, you have 7 restaurants. You always say we have plenty of money. That's not the point." Richard picked up his fork again, hoping to end the conversation. "Eat your dinner, Lily, it's getting cold." But Lily didn't eat. She pushed her chicken tenders around her plate, moving them from one side to the other without taking a single bite. Richard tried to focus on his own meal, but it was hard to enjoy it with his daughter sitting there looking miserable. Other diners were starting to notice too. An elderly couple at the next table kept glancing over, probably wondering what was wrong. Jennifer came back to check on them. "Is everything okay with the meal?" she asked, noticing Lily's untouched plate. "It's fine," Richard said quickly. "She's just not feeling well." Jennifer looked at Lily with concern, then followed the little girl's gaze to the window. Understanding crossed her face. She'd probably noticed the homeless woman too. Richard could see her thinking, could almost hear the gears turning in her head. He hoped she wouldn't say anything to encourage Lily's ideas. "Would you like me to box that up for later?" Jennifer asked, gesturing to Lily's plate. "No, that's okay," Richard said. "Just bring the check. I think we're going to call it an early night." But Lily suddenly perked up. "Yes, please. Can you box it up?" Jennifer looked between father and daughter, clearly sensing the tension. Richard gave her a look that said, "Just do what I say." But Lily was already pushing her plate toward the waitress with an expression of hope that Richard knew too well. It was the same look she got on Christmas morning, or when she really wanted something at the toy store. "Please," Lily said to Jennifer. "Can you put it in a box?" Jennifer hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, sweetie. I'll be right back." As she walked away, Richard leaned forward. "Lily, we're not giving your food to that woman. I know you want to help, but this isn't the way to do it." "Why not?" Because it just isn't." Richard knew it was a weak answer the moment it left his mouth. There are organizations that handle this kind of thing. Professionals who know how to help these people get back on their feet. Giving someone a free meal doesn't solve their problems. Lily looked at him with those big eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. But it would help today, wouldn't it? Even if it doesn't fix everything, it would help right now. Richard didn't have an answer for that. His phone buzzed with an email from his accountant about the quarterly reports. He glanced at it, grateful for the distraction. Numbers made sense. Numbers had rules and patterns. Numbers didn't make him feel guilty for having a successful business. When he looked up again, Lily was still staring out the window. The woman outside had shifted positions, trying to find some shelter from the wind that was now driving the snow almost sideways. Her cardboard sign had blown away, tumbling down the street until it disappeared into the darkness. Jennifer returned with a takeout container and a small bag. "Here you go," she said, setting them on the table. She looked at Richard, then at Lily, and something passed between them. Some kind of understanding that Richard wasn't part of. It made him uneasy. "Thank you," Lily said, clutching the bag like it was treasure. She looked at her father with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't defiance exactly, but it wasn't obedience either. It was something else, something that made Richard feel like he was the child and she was the adult. "Finish my steak if you want," Richard said, pushing his plate toward her. "At least eat something." But Lily shook her head. "I'm okay, Daddy. Can we go soon?" Richard signaled for the check, ready to be done with this uncomfortable evening. He just wanted to drop Lily off at her mother's house and go home to his quiet apartment, where he didn't have to explain why the world was unfair. As Jennifer brought over the bill, Richard pulled out his credit card without even looking at the total. Money was one thing he never had to worry about anymore. While Richard signed the credit card receipt, adding his usual 20% tip without thinking, Lily sat very still in her chair. The takeout bag was on her lap now, and she kept glancing between it and the window. The woman outside had turned away from the wind, her back pressed against the cold brick wall. "Ready to go?" Richard asked, standing up and reaching for his coat. "Can I use the bathroom first?" Richard checked his watch. It was getting late, and he'd promised his ex-wife he'd have Lily home by 8. "Make it quick, okay?" Lily slid out of her chair, but instead of heading toward the restrooms at the back of the restaurant, she walked straight to where Jennifer was clearing a nearby table. Richard couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw his daughter lean in close to the waitress, whispering something urgent. Jennifer's eyes widened, then softened. She glanced over at Richard, who was busy putting on his expensive wool coat, then back down at Lily. Richard watched them for a moment, feeling that same unease from earlier. But then his phone rang. It was David, his manager at the downtown location, probably calling about the supply order that had been short 3 cases of wine. Richard answered, turning away from the dining room to focus on the conversation. David was good at his job, but he needed constant reassurance that he was making the right decisions. "Just reorder it," Richard said into the phone, "and call the supplier to let them know we're not paying for the missing cases. This is the 2nd time this month they've shorted us." While Richard talked, Jennifer set down her tray of dirty dishes and knelt down to Lily's eye level. Sweetheart, what did you want to tell me? Lily's words came out in a rush. The lady outside. She's so cold. I have food and my daddy won't let me give it to her. But I can't eat it knowing she's hungry. Please, can you help me? Jennifer felt something twist in her chest. She'd noticed the homeless woman before. Had even brought her coffee once or twice when the manager wasn't looking. The woman's name was Dorothy, and she used to work as a cook at a hotel before everything fell apart. Jennifer knew because she'd asked, because unlike most people who walked past Dorothy every day, Jennifer had actually stopped to talk to her. Your daddy said no? Jennifer asked gently. Lily nodded, her eyes filling with tears she was trying hard not to let fall. He says we can't help everyone. But we're not helping everyone. We're just helping her. Just one person. Is that so wrong? Jennifer looked over at Richard, who was pacing by the entrance now, deep in his phone conversation. She thought about her own 8-year-old niece, about what she would want someone to teach that little girl about compassion and standing up for what's right. Then she thought about her job, about how she needed this paycheck to cover her rent and her mother's medical bills. Mr. Bennett wasn't a bad boss, but he was strict about the rules. No freebies, no handouts, keep the restaurant's image pristine. But looking at Lily's face, at the pure goodness in this child's heart, Jennifer made a decision. Okay, she whispered. But we have to be quick. Your daddy looks busy with his call. Do you trust me? Lily nodded so hard her ponytail bounced. Give me the bag, Jennifer said. She took the takeout container and headed toward the kitchen, with Lily following close behind. In the kitchen, the cooks were busy with the dinner rush, flames leaping from pans and orders being shouted back and forth. Nobody paid attention to Jennifer as she grabbed another container and ladled in some soup from the pot that was kept simmering for staff meals. It was just vegetable soup, nothing fancy like what the customers got, but it was hot and filling. She added 2 dinner rolls from the bread basket that hadn't been served yet, then grabbed a packet of butter and a plastic spoon. From her own locker, she pulled out a pair of wool gloves she'd bought on sale last week. They weren't expensive, but they were warm. What else does she need? Jennifer asked Lily. Lily thought hard, her face scrunched up in concentration. Then her eyes lit up. My scarf! I have my scarf in the coat room. It's pink and fuzzy and really warm. Mom got it for me, but I have 2 scarves and that lady doesn't have any. Are you sure? Jennifer asked. That sounds like a special scarf. I'm sure, Lily said firmly. Mom always says we should help people when we can. That's what she tells me all the time. She won't be mad. They hurried to the coat check where Lily's bright pink scarf was hanging on a hook below her father's coat. She grabbed it and hugged it for just a second, then handed it to Jennifer. Make sure she knows to wrap it around her neck really tight. That's how you stay warmest. Jennifer felt her throat get tight. This kid had a better heart than most adults she knew. You're a special little girl, you know that? Lily shrugged like it was no big deal, but Jennifer could see she was proud. Can we go give it to her now? There's a side door the staff uses, Jennifer said. If we're quick, your dad won't even notice. He's still on the phone. They peeked around the corner. Richard was indeed still on his call, now discussing something about quarterly profit margins and expansion plans. His back was to them as he stared out at the snowy street. Jennifer grabbed the bags of food and tucked the gloves and scarf inside. Follow me and stay quiet. They slipped through the kitchen, past the dishwasher who was too busy spraying down plates to notice them, and out the side door that opened into the alley. The cold hit them immediately, sharp and biting. Jennifer wished she'd grabbed her own coat, but there was no time. They hurried around to the front of the building where Dorothy sat. Up close, the woman looked even worse than Jennifer had thought. Her lips had a bluish tint and she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. When she saw them approaching, she tried to sit up straighter, probably expecting them to tell her to move along like everyone else did. Dorothy, Jennifer said softly, kneeling down beside her. The wet sidewalk immediately soaked through her work pants, but she didn't care. This is Lily, she wanted you to have something. Lily knelt down too, not worried at all about her nice dress getting dirty. She opened the bags and started pulling things out. We have chicken tenders and soup and bread and butter. And these gloves to keep your hands warm. And this is my scarf. It's really soft and warm. Pink is my favorite color. What's yours? Dorothy stared at them like they might be angels or maybe hallucinations brought on by the cold. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't have to do this. I know, Lily said simply, but I want to. You were cold and we had extra. It doesn't make sense for me to have food I'm not going to eat when you're hungry. Jennifer opened the soup container and put it in Dorothy's shaking hands. The warmth from it seemed to bring her back to life a little. Dorothy took a sip, then another, then started drinking it faster. "Slow down," Jennifer said gently. "You'll make yourself sick." Dorothy nodded and forced herself to slow down. Between sips of soup, she looked at Lily. "How old are you, sweetheart?" 8. "I'll be 9 in April. I had a daughter once," Dorothy said quietly. "She'd be about 25 now. Haven't seen her since she was 7. "What happened?" Lily asked with the kind of direct honesty only kids could manage. "Life happened," Dorothy said. She took another sip of soup, and Jennifer could see her trying to decide how much to share. "I got sick. Depression, they called it. Got so bad I couldn't work, couldn't take care of things properly. My sister took my girl to give her a better life. Was supposed to be temporary, but temporary turned into forever. By the time I got better, my daughter didn't even remember me, didn't want to know me." Jennifer felt her heart break. She'd assumed Dorothy was an addict or had made bad choices. It had been easier to think that than to consider that sometimes people just got unlucky, that sometimes the universe knocked you down and kept you down no matter how hard you tried to get back up. "I've been trying to find work," Dorothy continued, wrapping her hands around the warm soup container like it was precious. "But nobody wants to hire someone without an address. Can't get an address without a job. Can't get a job without an address. It's like being stuck in a circle with no way out." "What kind of work did you used to do?" Jennifer asked. "I was a cook. Worked at the Riverside Hotel for 15 years before I got sick. Made everything from scratch. People used to say I made the best pot roast in the city." A small smile crossed Dorothy's face at the memory. "I was good at what I did." "You're a cook?" Jennifer's mind started racing. She thought about the restaurant, about how they were always short-staffed in the kitchen. Mr. Bennett was picky about who he hired, but he also respected experience and skill. "Was a cook," Dorothy corrected. "Nobody's going to hire me looking like this." Lily had been quiet, listening to every word. Now she unwrapped her scarf and gently placed it around Dorothy's neck, carefully arranging it the way her mother had taught her. "There, that's better, right?" Dorothy touched the soft pink fabric like it was made of gold. Fresh tears spilled down her weathered cheeks. "You're an angel, little girl. Both of you are." "We should get back," Jennifer said, glancing nervously at the restaurant's front door. "Mr. Bennett is probably done with his call by now. Lily, your dad is going to be looking for you." "Wait," Dorothy said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was protected in a plastic sleeve, the corners bent from being carried everywhere. She held it out to Lily. "This is my daughter. Her name is Katie." Richard drove through the snow-covered streets with Lily quiet in the back seat. She was looking out the window, watching the snowflakes swirl under the streetlights. He kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, trying to figure out what was going on in that head of hers. His daughter had always been thoughtful, but tonight something felt different. She seemed older somehow, like she'd figured out something important that he'd missed. "You okay back there?" he asked. "Yeah, Daddy, I'm good. Your knees are all dirty." "What really happened?" Lily met his eyes in the mirror. "I told you. I was helping clean up." She wasn't lying exactly, but Richard could tell she wasn't telling him the whole truth either. He decided to let it go. "Pick your battles," his ex-wife always said. Some things weren't worth the fight. When they pulled up to his ex-wife's house, the porch light was on and he could see Amy waiting by the window. She opened the door before they even got out of the car, wrapping her cardigan tight against the cold. "You're late," Amy said. But her voice wasn't angry, just stating a fact. "Work call ran long, sorry." Lily hugged Richard goodbye and ran inside. Amy lingered on the porch for a moment. "She seems quiet. Everything okay at dinner?" Richard thought about the homeless woman, about Lily's untouched plate, about that look in his daughter's eyes. "Yeah, everything's fine. She's just tired." Amy nodded, but she was watching him with that look she used to give him during their marriage, the one that said she knew he was holding something back. "Richard, if something happened, nothing happened. I'll see you next week." He drove home through streets that were getting more dangerous by the minute. The snow was really coming down now, and he passed 2 cars that had slid off the road. His apartment felt cold and empty when he walked in, even though the heat was on. He poured himself a scotch and stood by his living room window, looking out at the city lights below. His phone buzzed. A text from David about tomorrow's delivery schedule. then an email from his accountant about tax documents, then a notification from his bank about an account balance, numbers and schedules and business. That's what his life had become. He thought about what Lily had said. "You have 7 restaurants. You always say we have plenty of money." She'd made it sound so simple, like having money meant you were obligated to share it with everyone who had less. But business didn't work that way. You couldn't build an empire by giving handouts to everyone who asked. He'd learned that lesson early, when he was working 3 jobs to save enough money to open his first restaurant. Nobody had helped him. He'd done it all himself. Richard finished his scotch and went to bed, pushing thoughts of homeless women and disappointed daughters out of his mind. He had a meeting with investors in the morning and he needed to be sharp, but sleep didn't come easy. He kept seeing that woman's face outside his window, kept hearing Lily's voice asking why they couldn't share when they had so much. 3 days passed. Richard threw himself into work, staying late at the office and checking in on all his restaurant locations. On Friday afternoon, he decided to make an unannounced visit to the location where he'd had dinner with Lily. He liked to do surprise inspections occasionally, keeping his managers on their toes. It was how he made sure standards stayed high. He walked in through the front door just after the lunch rush had ended. The hostess jumped when she saw him, immediately straightening up and fixing her smile. "Mr. Bennett, we weren't expecting you today." "That's the point," he said, not unkindly. "Where's Michael?" Michael was the manager of this location, in the back checking inventory. Richard nodded and started walking through the dining room, his eyes catching every detail. A water glass with lipstick that hadn't been wiped off. A table that needed to be reset. A smudge on one of the mirrors. He made mental notes of everything. That's when he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. Jennifer, the waitress from Tuesday night, was sitting at a corner booth with someone. Not just anyone. The homeless woman. She was wearing the same thin jacket, but now she also had a pink scarf around her neck, Lily's scarf. They were drinking coffee together and Jennifer had a notebook open between them, like they were discussing something important. Richard felt anger rise in his chest. This was his restaurant, not a charity. He'd built this business on reputation and image. Having a homeless woman sitting at one of his tables during business hours, even a slow Friday afternoon, was completely unacceptable. He strode over to their table, his footsteps loud enough that both women looked up. Jennifer's face went pale when she saw him. "Ms. Harper," he said coldly, using Jennifer's last name. "May I speak with you privately?" "Mr. Bennett, I can explain. Now." Jennifer stood up, whispering something to Dorothy before following Richard to the back hallway near the kitchen. She kept her chin up, but he could see her hands shaking. "What do you think you're doing?" Richard asked, keeping his voice low but hard. "This is a business, not a soup kitchen." "I'm on my break," Jennifer said. "I'm allowed to have coffee with whoever I want during my break. Not in my restaurant, you're not. And especially not with homeless people who scare away paying customers. There are no other customers here right now, and Dorothy doesn't scare anyone. She's a good person who's fallen on hard times. I don't care what her story is. I've called the police twice to have that woman removed from outside my building. Now you're inviting her inside? What were you thinking?" Jennifer's jaw tightened. "I was thinking that your daughter showed more compassion in 5 minutes than most adults do in a lifetime. I was thinking that maybe we could learn something from an 8-year-old about what really matters." Richard felt like he'd been slapped. "What are you talking about?" "What does Lily have to do with this?" Jennifer hesitated, seeming to realize she'd said too much. But there was no taking it back now. "Tuesday night, after dinner, Lily asked me to help her give her food to Dorothy. She couldn't stand the thought of eating when someone was freezing and hungry right outside the window. She gave Dorothy her entire meal. And her scarf. And I helped her do it because I couldn't stand watching that little girl's heart break when you told her no." Richard's face went red. "You went behind my back? You took my daughter outside to meet a homeless stranger? I helped a child be kind. That's what I did. And I've been helping Dorothy ever since because Lily inspired me. Did you know Dorothy used to be a cook? A good one. 15 years of experience in professional kitchens. But nobody will hire her because she doesn't have an address. That's not my problem." "No, it's not your problem," Jennifer shot back, her fear giving way to anger now. "Nothing is your problem except your profit margins and your reputation. You have 7 successful restaurants and more money than you know what to do with. But you can't spare a meal for someone who's hungry. Your own daughter understands something you don't. Watch yourself, Richard warned. I could fire you right now, then fire me. But it won't change the fact that a child saw a problem and tried to fix it, while you just looked the other way. It won't change the fact that your own daughter is ashamed of how you treated Dorothy that night. The words hit Richard harder than he wanted to admit. Lily didn't say anything to me about being ashamed. Of course she didn't, she loves you. But I saw her face that night, Mr. Bennett. I saw how it broke her heart when you said you couldn't help, and I've been thinking about it every day since. Before Richard could respond, he heard footsteps behind him. Michael, the manager, came hurrying down the hall looking worried. Mr. Bennett, I heard you were here. Is everything all right? Richard looked at Jennifer, then at Michael, then back at Jennifer. Ms. Harper was just explaining why she's entertaining homeless people at one of my tables. Michael's eyes went wide. He looked at Jennifer like she'd lost her mind. Jennifer, is this true? Her name is Dorothy, Jennifer said firmly. And yes, I bought her a coffee during my break. Is that a crime? It's grounds for termination, Michael said, looking at Richard for confirmation. Sir, I had no idea this was happening. I apologize. I'll handle this immediately. Richard should have said yes, should have backed up his manager and fired Jennifer on the spot for going against company policy and undermining his authority. That's what the Richard from last week would have done without hesitation. But he kept thinking about Lily, about her question in the car that he hadn't been able to answer, about the dirt on her knees and the secret in her eyes. Show me, he said instead. Sir? Michael looked confused. Show me this woman. I want to talk to her. Jennifer's expression shifted from defiance to uncertainty. Mr. Bennett, I don't think. You've already made it clear what you think. Ms. Harper. Now I want to see for myself what's so special about this person that my waitress is willing to risk her job, and my daughter gave away her dinner. They walked back out to the dining room. Dorothy had noticed the commotion and was already gathering her things, getting ready to leave. She looked terrified, like a deer about to bolt. Please don't leave, Richard said, surprising himself with his own words. Sit. I'd like to talk to you. Dorothy sat back down slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Jennifer started to sit too, but Richard held up his hand. Just me and her. Mr. Bennett. It's okay, Dorothy said quietly. I can handle this. Jennifer reluctantly stepped away, hovering near a no. Richard stood up from the booth, his decision made before he fully understood why he was making it. Come with me. Dorothy looked uncertain. Where? To the kitchen. If you're going to prove you can cook, might as well do it now. Jennifer's mouth fell open. Michael looked like he might faint. Even Dorothy seemed shocked. You're serious? I don't joke about my restaurants, Richard said. Come on. He led the way to the kitchen with Dorothy following behind and Jennifer trailing at a distance, not wanting to miss what happened next. The kitchen staff looked up when their boss walked in with a homeless woman, but years of working for Richard had taught them not to question his decisions to his face. They'd gossip about it later, but for now they just kept working. Richard pointed to the prep station. Make me something. Whatever you want. You have access to everything in this kitchen. Impress me. Dorothy looked around the gleaming kitchen, taking in the professional equipment, the organized stations, the ingredients laid out for the dinner service. Her hands were shaking, but not from the cold anymore, from nerves or maybe excitement. Can I make pot roast? It was my specialty. We don't serve pot roast here. I know, but that's what I'm best at. And if I'm going to prove myself, I want to show you what I can really do. Richard checked his watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. Pot roast takes hours. Not the way I make it. Give me 90 minutes. Something in her voice, that quiet confidence, made Richard nod. Fine, 90 minutes. Michael, make sure she has whatever she needs. Michael still looked confused but nodded. Yes, sir. Richard walked back out to the dining room, poured himself a coffee, and sat down to do some work on his laptop. But he couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about what Jennifer had said, about how his own daughter was ashamed of him. Was that true? Had he really become so focused on business that he'd forgotten basic human decency? He pulled out his phone and texted Amy. Did Lily say anything to you about Tuesday night's dinner? The response came a few minutes later. She told me about the homeless woman. Said you wouldn't let her help. Why? Richard stared at the message. So Lily had told her mother. Which meant Amy knew he'd said no to their daughter's request to be kind. What must she think of him? What must Lily think of him? He typed back, It's complicated. Amy's response was immediate. No, Richard. It's really not. He put his phone away, feeling worse than before. Through the kitchen door, he could smell something cooking. Something that smelled better than most of what his high-priced chefs usually made. Rich and savory and comforting. Jennifer appeared with a fresh pot of coffee and refilled his cup without asking. That was a good thing you just did, she said quietly. I haven't done anything yet. We'll see if she can actually cook. She can cook. But that's not what I meant. I meant giving her a chance to prove herself. Most people wouldn't have done that. Richard didn't respond. He opened his email and tried to focus on a contract review, but the smell from the kitchen kept distracting him. At one point, Michael came out looking stunned. Sir, you need to see what she's doing in there. I've never seen anyone work that fast. I'll see it when it's done, but sir, Michael, let her work. The 90 minutes felt like forever. Richard answered emails, reviewed next week's schedules for all 7 locations, and approved 3 supply orders. But his mind wasn't really on any of it. He kept glancing at the kitchen door, kept checking his watch. Finally, after exactly 90 minutes, Dorothy emerged carrying a plate. Her face was flushed from the heat of the kitchen, and there was a spot of gravy on her borrowed apron, but she was standing tall. She set the plate in front of Richard like she was serving royalty. Pot roast perfectly browned and sliced thin, baby carrots and potatoes roasted until they were golden, rich gravy that wasn't too thick or too thin, a sprig of fresh rosemary on top for garnish. It looked like something you'd get at a 5-star restaurant, except it also looked like something your grandmother would make. Somehow, Dorothy had managed to make comfort food look elegant. Richard cut into the meat. It was tender enough to cut with his fork. He took a bite and the flavor hit him immediately. This wasn't just good. This was exceptional. The meat had been seared perfectly to lock in the juices, then braised with what tasted like red wine and herbs. The vegetables had been roasted with butter and garlic. Everything was seasoned exactly right. He took another bite, then another. He couldn't help it. The kitchen staff had come out now, standing in the doorway to watch. Jennifer was practically holding her breath. Michael looked back and forth between Richard and the food, trying to read his boss's expression. Richard finished half the plate before he finally set down his fork. He looked up at Dorothy, who was trying not to show how nervous she was. You made this in 90 minutes, yes, sir. In a kitchen you've never worked in before, yes, sir. Using equipment you're not familiar with, yes, sir. Though your equipment is nicer than what I used to work with. Made it easier, actually. Richard sat back, processing what he'd just tasted. This woman, who'd been sleeping on the streets, who hadn't worked in a professional kitchen in years, had just made one of the best meals he'd ever eaten, and she'd done it under pressure, in an unfamiliar environment, in less time than it should have been possible. The Riverside Hotel was stupid to let you go, he said finally. Dorothy's eyes widened. Does that mean? It means I'm offering you a position. Prep cook to start. $7.50 an hour, same as everyone else at that level. You'll work under Chef Antonio, and if you prove yourself, we'll talk about moving you up. Fair? Tears started running down Dorothy's face. More than fair. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. This is the hardest kitchen in the city to work in. I have high standards, and I don't tolerate mistakes. You'll be expected to show up on time, follow every health code, and work harder than you've probably ever worked in your life. Can you handle that? Yes, sir. I won't let you down. You also need an address, Richard continued, his mind already working through the logistics. Michael, call that apartment building on 5th Street. The one where we rent units for out-of-town managers. See if they have any efficiency units available. We'll cover the first month's rent as an advance on Dorothy's wages. She can pay it back over time. Michael nodded, pulling out his phone immediately. And you'll need proper work clothes. Jennifer, take her to that uniform store on Madison. Get her 3 sets of kitchen whites, proper shoes, everything she needs. Put it on the company account. Jennifer was crying now too. Yes, sir. Right away. When can you start? Richard asked Dorothy. Right now if you want me to. Tomorrow is fine. Be here at 6 a.m. sharp for the breakfast shift. Chef Antonio will train you on our systems and recipes. Don't be late. I won't be. I promise I won't be. Dorothy wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing tears across her cheeks. Mr. Bennett, I don't know what to say. You've given me my life back. I gave you a job, Richard corrected. What you do with it is up to you. But I'll tell you the same thing I tell everyone who works for me. I reward hard work and talent. You've shown me you have both. Now you need to show me you have reliability and dedication. Do that and you'll go far in my organization. I will. I swear I will. Richard stood up, the conversation over in his mind. But Dorothy reached out and touched his arm, stopping him. Your daughter, she said softly. She saved my life that night. I was so cold and so hungry and so tired of fighting. I was thinking about just giving up, finding some warm corner and letting the snow cover me. But then she came out with that food and that scarf and those big eyes full of hope. She made me remember that there are good people in the world, that maybe I wasn't forgotten after all. You should know that about her. That she's special. Richard felt something crack in his chest. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and walked away toward his office in the back of the restaurant. He closed the door and sat down at the desk, putting his head in his hands. What had he become? When had he gotten so hard, so closed off, that it took his 8-year-old daughter and a struggling waitress to remind him what it meant to be human? He thought about his own journey. 20 years ago, he'd been working in a kitchen not unlike this one, trying to save every penny to open his own place. He remembered the manager who'd given him extra shifts when his rent was due, the supplier who'd given him a break on prices when he was just starting out, the bank officer who'd taken a chance on his loan application when other banks had turned him down. He'd had help. He'd had people who believed in him when he had nothing. When had he forgotten that? There was a knock on the door. Come in, he called, wiping his eyes quickly. Jennifer opened the door holding a takeout container. You didn't finish your pot roast. Seemed ashamed to waste it. Richard took the container. Thank you. Jennifer hesitated in the doorway. Can I say something, Mr. Bennett? You've said plenty today. But go ahead. What you did just now, giving Dorothy a chance, that was the man your daughter was hoping to see on Tuesday night. That's the dad she brags about to her friends. The one who built something from nothing and worked his way up. She's always been so proud of you, and now I understand why. Richard looked at the container of pot roast in his hands. I almost didn't do it. I came here ready to fire you for insubordination. I know. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Lily's voice came through, small and hopeful. Really? You did that? Really, she made me the best pot roast I've ever eaten. Turns out she's an amazing cook. She just needed someone to give her a chance. I knew she was good. Lily's excitement bubbled through the phone. I could tell just by looking at her. Some people just have a good feeling around them. You know? Richard smiled, feeling lighter than he had in days. Yeah, I'm starting to understand that. And Lily, I'm sorry about Tuesday night. You were right and I was wrong. We should have helped her. You tried to teach me something important and I didn't listen. It's okay, Daddy, you listened today. That's what matters. The simple forgiveness in his daughter's voice made Richard's eyes sting. Kids were remarkable that way. They didn't hold grudges or keep score. They just loved you and believed you could be better. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Daddy. Can I meet her? The lady? Her name is Dorothy. And yes, next time we have dinner, I'll introduce you. Tell her I said hi, and that I'm glad she liked the scarf. After they hung up, Richard sat in his office for a few more minutes thinking. Then he opened his laptop and started typing an email to all his managers across his 7 locations. The subject line read, New Hiring Initiative. The next morning, Dorothy showed up at 5:45, 15 minutes early. She was wearing one of the new kitchen uniforms Jennifer had bought her, and she'd clearly showered and tried to do something with her hair. She still looked rough around the edges, but there was something different in her eyes. Hope, maybe. Purpose. Chef Antonio, a stocky man in his 40s who ran the kitchen with military precision, looked skeptical when Richard introduced them. Boss, with all respect, we're in the middle of breakfast rush prep. I don't have time to babysit. Then don't babysit, Richard said. Put her to work. She knows what she's doing. Antonio shrugged and pointed Dorothy to the prep station. Dice those onions. 1/4-inch uniform cuts, and I want them done in 10 minutes. Richard watched as Dorothy picked up the knife and went to work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, the blade flashing as she made quick, precise cuts. Antonio watched too, his skepticism fading as he saw how she handled the knife. Not bad, he admitted after she finished in 8 minutes. You've done this before. 15 years, Dorothy said quietly. I'm a little rusty, but it comes back fast. Okay, carrots next, Julienne, same speed. Dorothy nodded and got to work. By the time the breakfast rush started, she'd earned a small nod of approval from Antonio, which was high praise coming from him. Richard left them to it. heading to his office to tackle the mountain of work waiting for him. Over the next few weeks, Dorothy became part of the kitchen. She showed up early every day, stayed late when needed, and worked harder than anyone had a right to expect. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, and slowly won over even the most skeptical members of the staff. Jennifer kept Richard updated, even though he could see the progress for himself during his frequent visits. "She's amazing," Jennifer told him one afternoon. "She's teaching the younger cooks techniques they never learned in culinary school. And she's always the first one to volunteer for the hard jobs. How's she doing with the apartment?" "Good, she's making it a home. Even got some plants for the windowsill. She cries sometimes, though. Happy tears, she says. Can't believe this is real." Richard found himself stopping by the restaurant more often than necessary, always making sure to check on how Dorothy was doing. He told himself it was just good management, making sure his investment was paying off. But the truth was, seeing her succeed felt important in a way he couldn't quite explain. One evening, about a month after Dorothy started, Richard was in his office when there was a knock on the door. It was Antonio. "Boss, you got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" Antonio closed the door and sat down. "It's about Dorothy. I need to talk to you about her." Richard felt his stomach drop. Had she messed up somehow? Fallen back into old habits? "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. That's what I need to talk to you about." Antonio leaned forward. "Boss, that woman is the best cook I've worked with in 20 years. She's better than me, if I'm being honest. She knows things about flavor and technique that I'm still learning. She should be running her own kitchen, not prepping vegetables in mine." Richard sat back, surprised. "You want me to promote her?" "I want you to make her a sous chef at one of your other locations. She's wasted as a prep cook. And she's ready. Trust me on this. It's only been a month. I know how long it's been. I also know talent when I see it. You gave her a chance when nobody else would. Now give her the chance to show what she can really do." Richard thought about it. Antonio was right, but promoting Dorothy so quickly would raise eyebrows. People would say he was playing favorites, that he was running a charity instead of a business. But then he thought about the email he'd sent to his managers that first day, about the new hiring initiative he was putting in place, about how he'd asked them to give chances to people who'd been overlooked. If he wasn't willing to promote someone who deserved it just because of where she'd come from, what kind of message did that send? "Okay," Richard said. "I'll move her to sous chef at the downtown location. They need someone who can handle the volume there." Antonio grinned. "You won't regret it. That woman's got something special." The next day, Richard called Dorothy into his office. She came in looking nervous, probably worried she'd done something wrong. He gestured for her to sit. "Dorothy, Chef Antonio tells me you're doing excellent work." "I'm trying my best, sir. He also tells me you're wasted as a prep cook." Her face fell. "I'm sorry if I'm not meeting expectations. I can work harder." "No, you don't understand. I'm promoting you. Sous chef at my downtown location. It's a bigger kitchen, more pressure, more responsibility, but also better pay and a real chance to grow in this organization. Interested?" Dorothy stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You're promoting me? After a month? You've earned it. Antonio says you're the best cook he's worked with. I trust his judgment. I don't know what to say. Say yes." "Yes. Yes, of course yes." Dorothy was crying now, not even trying to hide it. "Mr. Bennett, you've changed my life. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Keep working hard. Keep being excellent. And when you see someone else who needs a chance, remember how this felt and pay it forward. That's how you repay me." Dorothy wiped her eyes and nodded. "I will. I promise I will." After she left, Richard sat at his desk feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Satisfaction that had nothing to do with profit margins or expansion plans. This was different. This was about making a real difference in someone's life. His phone rang. It was Amy. "Richard, I need to talk to you about something. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. But Lily's school is having a career day next month. The kids are supposed to bring in someone who inspires them to talk about their work. Lily wants to bring Dorothy." Richard felt his throat tighten. "She wants to bring Dorothy?" "She's been telling everyone at school about the homeless woman who became a chef. Apparently it's made quite an impression. So what do you think? Would Dorothy be willing to come talk to a class of third graders about her journey?" "I'll ask her." "But Amy, I'm her employer. Doesn't Lily want me to come?" Amy's voice softened. "Richard, she's always been proud of you. But what you did for Dorothy, that's the story she wants to share. The story about how one act of kindness created ripples that changed everything. And honestly, it's a better story than my dad owns restaurants. Richard knew she was right. I'll talk to Dorothy. Dorothy was thrilled to speak at Lily's school. On the day of the career fair, Richard took the afternoon off to attend. He sat in the back of the classroom while Dorothy stood at the front, still a little rough around the edges but standing tall in her chef's uniform. She told the kids about losing everything, about living on the streets, about the night a little girl in a pink scarf gave her food and hope when she'd been ready to give up. She told them about getting a second chance and working hard to prove she deserved it. She told them that kindness matters, that one person can make a difference, and that it's never too late to start over. The kids listened with wide eyes. Some of them asked questions. One boy wanted to know if she was still scared sometimes. Every day, Dorothy answered honestly. But being scared doesn't mean you stop trying. It just means you have to be brave. When it was over, Lily ran up to Dorothy and hugged her. Dorothy hugged her back, and Richard saw her whisper something in Lily's ear that made his daughter beam. After the presentation, as they walked to the parking lot, Lily slipped her hand into Richard's. "Daddy, I'm really proud of you. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. This whole thing started because you couldn't stand to see someone suffering. That took real courage. Jennifer helped too. And you gave Dorothy a job. Everybody helped." Richard squeezed her hand. "That's the point, isn't it? When everybody helps, amazing things can happen." 6 months later, Richard was reviewing the quarterly reports for all his locations. The downtown restaurant, where Dorothy was now head chef, had the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the company. People were writing reviews about the food, saying it reminded them of home, that it had heart, and